Okay.
Sometimes you need to let go.
Sometimes you just need to let go. That's our idea about the podcast in the first episode.
Just let go and take some psychedelics.
Exactly.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 1 of Ideologica Obscura. I'm your host, Thomas. You know me from episode 0. I introduce myself in very explicit terms. Hello, everybody. And I want to introduce somebody to you.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm that special somebody. Well, I'm Eren. I am also in the same university as Thomas, and well,
We're both mentally deranged.
we're both insane enough to do a subject which drives many people insane.
Yes.
So we're very excited about that.
So, and we're carving out our own insane niche in the market, particularly catered to insane schizophrenics like you guys.
And also the 2 or 3 normal people that
yeah.
are also listening to. Like
that being our family.
Exactly. So we're
Hi,
very
Mom, hi,
accommodative.
Dad.
Yeah, we're very accommodative towards like all age groups. Let's say.
Exactly. We're an intersectional podcast. You know. We'll bring.
I'm studying humanities. If I hear that word again, I'm gonna scream.
Well, that's I. Well, with that noted. So we're gonna be starting at the top of the ice cube. I'm sorry, the iceberg.
This is, by the way, our third take where he made the same mistake.
This is our second take, and I did that
let's
on
call
purpose.
Let's call it an ice cube.
We're calling the iceberg an ice cube.
Yeah, exactly.
Because what really is what's the differentiation between an iceberg?
Yeah,
and
geometry.
An ice cube?
Geometry is something that's open to interpretation, right? Because
Exactly.
there are no nature laws.
Exactly. Geometry is a pseudoscience developed by people to sell cubes.
It's developed by Big Cube, yes.
It's developed by Big Cube, yeah.
Okay, let's not go off on any tangents, and let's go.
We're going to be introducing episode 1, and today we're going to start at the top of the ice cube with the ideological ice cube with National Bolshevism. Some of you may probably know this and think of it as vanilla of the most like wacky ideologies. So,
and the others are listening to this saying that, like, how are those two connected to each other? Aren't they the complete opposite?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for those who don't understand it, I'm gonna quickly define it in very simple terms.
Extremely simple terms.
The extremely simple terms in that National Bolshevism. This is a definition I got from Erik Van Ree. Also, all the sources I'll be using for this podcast will be in the description. So. Shout out to the academics that slaved away for this. He defines it as a radical tendency which combines a commitment to class struggle and total nationalization of the means of production with extreme nationalistic chauvinism. Basically, think about it as if Nazis were actually National Socialists.
Yeah, because they weren't very, like, they were national, sure, but they weren't very socialist.
Exactly.
When it came to, like, reining in big industry.
That's often one of the things that people get confused about and defining what is a National Bolshevik, because does this include communists because they existed within the state boundaries? Does this include, right-wing populists that say, hey, maybe we should give out a UBI, basically UBI to people? Or does this include, people who, the so-called National Socialists of Nazi Germany? Who said that they appealed to the Arbeiter against the international Jewish conspiracy, which they equate Judaism.
Which conspiracy are we talking about right
now? We're talking
because
about,
like, I'm Jewish and I'm in, like, according to people, I'm into like 2,000 conspiracies.
The one where you own all the money and own all the things.
The oldest one.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
The one where you guys control the international banking system.
And, like, we give people very high interest rates that they're unable to pay.
Exactly. And basically, it's what they do is they equate Jewish people to capitalism, which is very funny because I know most Jews that I know are often very left-wing.
And most Jews I know are very, like, apolitical, so.
Yeah. So it can be a spread,
Yeah, it's as if ethnic groups have a differentiation of ideas within them, huh?
Exactly. So, but that's the thing, is that how are we going to talk about National Bolsheviks when we can't define it? Well, simple. I'm going to make it up.
This podcast is just like Thomas making up shit along the way.
Exactly.
We have no sources. The sources we made it the fuck up.
So, that's the whole question. How do we define it? We're going to define it based on what Erik Van Ree said. In that I don't think that most communist countries actually apply to this definition because you think about it, their political economy was they're trapped within the nation state. You can't really have like the idealized internationalist communitarianism, and even the most like chauvinistic of communists, whether that be Enver Hoxha, uh, probably not Pol Pot. Let's be clear about that one. Or even like the DPRK, there was some degree of at least either real commitment to internationalism or an aesthetic of internationalism. But there was also, but you also have to think about like some of these countries were post-colonial and they were working within their colonial boundaries, and their identity was developed from these colonial boundaries, like in Vietnam.
Yeah,
But
they were exposed to like the Western way of thinking of like borders, national identities, and like,
exactly,
sovereignty and all
exactly, and they formed that, and they formed like more of egalitarian nationalism, in which like we are all of one people, and we've got to fight against our colonial oppressors, yada yada. But what about people like so we have that, and I think that some communists don't exactly apply to that because they didn't necessarily always meet the criteria of this real rugged, this real like nationalism, this like blood and soil kind of nationalism. Well, in the case of the right, you had the Nazis, and some
Yeah.
people say that you had socialist Nazis like Otto Strasse, and I think yes, they actually would apply to that definition. But I'm not going to talk about Strassism because I do think they deserve their own video, so we're not talking about them.
And
in this
we don't want to
series.
go off on any more tangents.
Oh yeah, no. But if you talk about the actual Nazis, like Hitler, Goering, Himmler, those guys weren't actually socialists at all, despite being called National Socialists. Ironically enough, they weren't.
They sought out unity on like an ethnic basis rather than a classist one.
Yeah, well as we said before, that they use the class, they use the idea, the veneer of class struggle, and this is something what an author I've been reading about from Michael Parenti. He talks about how the nationalists use like a fake or a faux like revolutionary aesthetic in order to like excite the working class, and they do target like aspects of big business, but not universally. Mainly, it's for the Jews type thing. The Jews are controlling the big banks, they're controlling the international big businesses, and gouging your wages or stuff like that.
Therefore, we need to be self-sufficient without being like overly dependent
Exactly.
on the Jewish lobby.
But the thing would then be is that they would, but by being self-sufficient, they would instead not have economic autarky. They would have German businesses do it, like Volkswagen or BMW, instead making their products. So they would, and the Nazis themselves were often in bed with a lot of these big businesses, giving
Like
out
Coca-Cola.
handouts. Exactly, giving them like corporate handouts, corporate welfare, breaking up unions and stuff like that. So the Nazis themselves were very much capitalistic, and this is going back to Michael Parenti. They were the watchdogs of capitalism in big businesses.
Yeah,
this,
it was. Yeah,
and this happened in Italy as well, and also in other countries.
Spain too.
Spain, Chile. This is basically what happened is that big businesses would get concerned over the communist involvement, and then they would call up the Nazis and other fascists, and they would come work out a deal. So there's that. But then you may ask, who do we have? And well, where did this come from? Where does this idea of National Bolshevism, this seemingly paradoxical idea of communism and fascism, what we generally think as like two bipolar opposites, how could they synthesize? Well, we have to talk about World War I. Now, Eren, you guys fought in World War I.
Yeah, you guys also fought.
Yeah, we both of our sides. If you don't know where we're from, I'm from the United States.
I'm from Turkey,
yeah,
formerly known as the Ottoman Empire.
Yeah. So, what was World War I exactly?
Well, based on the names and the adjectives in like that term, I think it was a war.
Yeah, I think so
that
too.
was like encompassing the entire planet.
Yeah, I think so too.
And I feel like it was the first of its kind.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I mean, I heard apparently this is something I'm not sure, but it was like very destructive.
It was very destructive. Yeah, it made people like it was destructive both in material and also spiritual ways,
psychological and physical.
Psychological as well, physical, whatever you think of. Like basically destroyed the idea of like a bright future for many Westerners.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
Which
well,
I mean, I believe that's where like
we got a bright future out of it.
I mean, yeah, we did get a bright future, but like we didn't live to see the First World War. Where we were born 90 years after that. So I feel like based on this like spiritual corruption, I feel like specifically losing like Germany and like the Turks have had like ideological developments that
Exactly.
was a result of this.
Yeah, and even like the winners of the war. I mean, it was just such a bad war. It was a terrible war that like saw like millions of young men just die for like a bunch of inbred assholes back in their palaces or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. They just like the only thing they got out of the war was either death or being shell shocked after 4 years of constant bombardment.
Well, we got Belgium out of it.
Yay! That's some war I'll fight in.
Oh boy, can't wait to die for the independence of Belgium.
Yes. But I mean, the conservative revolution came out of it.
Exactly, and you may be asking, what is the conservative revolution? Well, in response to World War One, it was generally an embodiment, I guess, of the pessimism and the degeneration that society faced after World War One. That was created by liberal democracies were of a
Rationalism.
well, yeah,
modernism.
I mean, after World War One, you saw the rise of democracies. I mean, Germany became a democracy, got rid of the Kaiser, and you also saw the rise of other democracies in the new places in Europe, like in Czechoslovakia or Austria. And the democracies that won, Germany was pissed off, and Germany was out for blood again. And basically, what they believed was it was a broad movement that began in 1919, but generally they believed kind of in the same ideas of that they were against the developments of Enlightenment egalitarianism, modernity, rationalism, democracy, and even Christian ethics, if you think about Nietzsche and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And
he's the guy with the large mustache.
Exactly. Got large mustache man.
Yeah.
But
that's his only contribution.
Exactly. But this so-called pre-fascist movement would produce various thinkers such as Fichte, List, Müller von den Bruck, and Spengler. And you know about Spengler.
Yeah, I know about Spengler.
So tell who's Spengler?
I mean, he was one of those pessimists that was like a result of World War One. Because the thing is, after the destruction caused by World War One and like the alienation that people had from Western ideas such as egalitarianism and rationalism, Spengler was one of the people that didn't see much hope in the future of the West.
Yeah.
So that's why he wrote a book about that.
Yeah, exactly. He was a historian that believed in cyclical cycles of death and rebirth, I guess. Well, I'm not sure about the rebirth part. Probably just
just that because he was overly pessimistic.
The rise and decline of nations. Like he would talk about Babylonia as one civilization and Rome and stuff like that. And he would talk about the West and how it was in its decline and stuff.
Though I mean, he was partially right because we saw a massive decline in Western Europe specifically.
Exactly.
But also North America is a part of West, so Western Europe declined while North America flourished.
To an extent. I mean, they got rid of alcohol, so I can't say that.
They got rid of alcohol. Yeah.
So, but generally, what they did believe in was socialism. They called themselves socialists, but not in social terms, mainly in economic. They liked what they saw in the Soviet Union. That's something we're going to talk about later. Is how much that the Soviet Union played into this. What they believed is that the economic autarky that the Soviet Union had was great for the society and for its unity because it did not rely on outside interference, did not rely on an international monetary or banking system, and that what they did believe in social terms was a national spirit, a unique national spirit that was called a Volksgeist, a body politic known as the popular community, a Volksgemeinschaft, in which these aspects would be welded together into a strong authoritarian state that would control the means of production, with the social glue being a quote-unquote Prussian culture that would uphold a rigidly stratified militaristic society,
So as in, it would be a very militaristic society, and it would also have state-owned means of production.
Exactly.
Not state-supported like Nazi Germany, but state-owned like the Soviet Union.
Exactly. And this is, I mean, the Russian Revolution was another big part of this.
Yeah.
Because you saw the rise of a whole new ideology and everything. And that it came to fruition. People didn't thought it would have been impossible. Like, they would have expected it to happen in Germany. I mean, it almost did happen in Germany.
It almost did happen in a lot of parts of
it
Europe,
did, but it never was successful until 1917.
As in, the governments adapted to the changes wanted by, like, the workers and all that, but they never did truly change, like, way of governance.
Exactly. They maintained the same authoritarian system that of the czars, but then they painted it red, and then they controlled businesses. And what they did was, and what Stalin did, I mean, he did dekulakization, he got rid of the landlords, and there was total unitary control of, the economy and the nation by him.
Yeah.
I mean, that was something that, like, really turned on these revolutionary conservatives so much so.
Yeah, because they're like, God, I wish the state had more control in my life.
Yeah. God, I want big government.
Free will, the ability to spend money on whatever I want all of that gone. I just want the state to guide everything I do.
Well, I mean, mainly I think the reason why is because of aesthetics. And also they would view themselves as the ones on top. They didn't have to be, they didn't want to have to worry about not being of shortages or stuff like that, or of supply chain inefficiencies.
Yeah,
because that was the whole thing. Is that, like, whenever someone advocates for this ideology, they always view themselves on top, especially if it's authoritarian.
Yep.
And so we have that, and we have where it came from. So let's talk about how it was applied. You want to know what was first applied as?
Tell me.
Foreign policy. Isn't that great for us?
So we've been talking about the domestic policy aspect of National Bolshevism for half an hour now.
Yeah.
But now we're gonna talk about the first application, which was actually foreign policy.
Exactly.
Damn.
I mean, these ideas of were existing before, but it was in actual practice by government officials. Obviously, you had various ideologues and stuff like that constantly, basically just posting. The equivalent of posting on Twitter.
Just tweeting, yeah.
Basically, yeah. In the form of that would just be, writing journals and shit like that, and being like, the SPD is a bunch of fucking libtards. They did not support fucking Rosa Luxemburg, and they're signing the Versailles Treaty. They're traitors to the German state.
Yeah, exactly. Because the Treaty of Versailles was seen by many Germans as a massive betrayal.
Oh yeah. No, even literally every side, both left and right, hated the Versailles Treaty. I mean, if you were German, you hated it. So, in the case of foreign policy, that was actually what it began to be applied as into real policy terms before it was, being advocated as an actual ideology. We'll talk about what that ideological development, where it came from, but first we have to talk about is foreign policy application. So the idea began with German conservatives arguing that that Germany should ally with the USSR and cooperate with the socialist proletariat of Germany in order to have a new order, new unified order that would make Germany strong, both internally and internationally. Make it great again,
make Germany great again.
Exactly.
When are we putting that on a hat?
We have to wait until 1933 for that.
Okay, that's gonna be next episode.
So, and what happened was that, then someone even argued that, like, with the support of the Soviet Union and the unification of Germany, of of the working classes and of that of the nation, we can then go to war with the Entente and take back Alsace-Lorraine and make Germany great again.
Yep.
I want Belgium, goddammit.
Yeah, Germany's the only one that wants Belgium.
And a small minority of these more radical conservatives even argued that Germany could be reinvigorated by having a Bolshevik revolution. One of these guys that explicitly said it was Paul Etzbacher. in April of 1929, and he was a member of the Reichstag and argued for the introduction of Bolshevism in Germany, for a council system, and the socialization of the means of production without compensation, arguing that the rich should make the sacrifice of their capital for the fatherland. And then in May that year, the Deutsche Tagzeitung coined the phrase National Bolshevismus. So that is National Bolshevism as it is. But how do we get there? I know I keep going back and forth, but it's important.
How do we get there? So do we have to go to like the World War I period of Europe?
No, we're going back to Roman Empire times. The battle
good.
with Arminius.
So what we're saying right now is that this episode is gonna be 5 hours long.
Exactly. No.
Okay, good. So the first actual national Bolshevist was Julius Caesar.
Actually, I think a lot of Nazbols on Twitter would probably like that.
I mean, yeah, that's why I don't post anything about Roman history.
I want to follow its ideological development before 1929, so we can actually figure out how we got there. Because it was, as an ideology, it was being developed by multiple people that were in German society. Such as, one of the guys actually wrote the National Bolshevik Manifesto, Karl Otto Peitel. I think I'm pronouncing that right. And Ernst Junger, or various other revolutionary conservatives that were, revolutionary nationalists, that the germ of National Bolshevism developed in. But one guy I want to follow who I did the most research on, that I want to talk about, because I feel like his life and his ideological development is very emblematic of the ideological development of National Bolshevism. And that guy is Ernst Niekisch. He was born in the German Empire in Trebnitz, which is now in modern-day Poland and Silesia, in 1889. He worked as a school teacher, but then later joined the SPD in 1917, and was involved in... We're going to talk about it.
Yes.
You're excited. You were excited for this at the beginning.
That's the reason why I became a part of the podcast.
and was involved in the short-lived Bavarian Soviet Republic. Now, if you've never heard of the Bavarian Soviet Republic, you may have not learned too much about the German Revolution that occurred from 1918 to 1919. Basically, this was when Germany almost had a communist revolution. What Karl Marx had, that an industrialized society would have a communist revolution, particularly Germany, because it was so industrialized, almost happened, but it didn't.
It happened in an overly peasant-dominated society that was Russia.
Exactly, and then it happened again in an even more peasant society known as China.
Yeah, China. Those two are my favorite industrial countries.
Yeah, exactly.
So Marx had some foresight.
Yeah. So when you get dabbed on by a Chinese peasant. And the reason why it didn't happen, mainly you can blame the SPD. That's right. Olaf Scholz prevented communism in Germany.
The immortal German chancellor.
Damn you, Chancellor Olaf Scholz!
Exactly. You ruined my country!
So... and the reason why is because the SPD would hire people called... a group of jolly good men called the Freikorps to come in and kill communists, particularly, Rosa Luxemburg and Karl Liebknecht, I think.
Two of the most prominent socialist thinkers of like the early 20th century.
Yes, exactly. They killed them, and then eventually it would backfire on them because the Freikorps would also try to do coups against the SPD government, and then the SPD government would get communists to help them out, and it would be kind of going back and forth.
So it was like an overall mumbo-jumbo of ideological conflict.
Yeah, that, but also the SPD was kind of playing both sides.
But I mean, in the end, they won, so I feel like that strategy worked.
I think in the end they eventually lost.
Yeah, but I mean,
in the long run,
in the short run, they won.
Yeah. Don't play both sides when you're a social democrat.
Yeah, basically.
So, and the same thing would happen with the Bavarian Soviet Republic, which declared its independence from Germany, and was racked by ideological infighting and government inefficiency.
Gee, that reminds me of somewhere. Literally every single Socialist Republic.
No way, really? No,
Wow,
I never heard of it.
The Paris Commune had the same problems 40 years ago?
Way.
No.
What? No.
God, impossible.
No, impossible. I can't imagine.
The left has ideological infighting.
this
This is the place where you're learning new information, folks.
Well, I mean, today, actually, you know how many communist parties there are today in Germany?
Like 200?
4.
Damn.
And 2 of them are called almost the same thing. There is the KPD, and then there's the DKP.
So the People's Front of Judea and the Judean People's Front.
Exactly. Splitters.
Oh shit.
Eren spilled his coffee on his beautiful but also slightly worn Turkish table.
Yep.
It's actually pretty nice. Anyway, and it was racked by ideological infighting, and much like Rosa Luxemburg and other communists, it got owned by the Freikorps.
Yeah, basically.
And they would be and people would be put on trial, including Ernst Niekisch. Ernst Niekisch was actually involved in the government and was put on trial for the government in the Bavarian Soviet Republic actually did cause some atrocities to some degree, along with the Freikorps. Both sides were killing people in between 1918 and 1919. And he stood trial and denied responsibility for the actions of the government and its atrocities, and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. But this experience of the Bavarian Revolution was quote, a crucible through which Niekisch had to pass in order to reach National Bolshevism, since a revolution in Germany, what he believed is, a revolution in Germany could never succeed as long as socialist workers and nationalist soldiers and veterans face one another behind lowered guns. Basically, what he believed is that now you need to have the workers and nationalist soldiers and veterans unite together in order for a revolution to occur.
Yeah, because if they kill each other, then it weakens both sides. But if they unite, then they become one strong force.
Exactly. This is kind of like why I think the Russian Revolution was successful, is because you had soldiers that were on the Soviet side. If you just have a bunch of, sure, you can have workers pick up arms and hold back government forces. You can definitely do that. But if you're talking about industrial, but they're less likely to win because workers are not trained military guys. They don't have the same discipline. They don't have the same
coordination,
training. They make the same mistakes that they probably would have avoided, you know. Which is why you should read theory.
That's the best pastime hobby anyone has.
Exactly.
To all the workers that just do backbreaking labor for 18 hours a day, read some theory, bro.
Read
some theory.
Read all volumes of Das Kapital.
Yeah, literally, sleeping is overrated. Just spend the rest of your life trying to understand what Marx meant.
If not, if you don't do that, you're a reactionary.
Why are you working? Read some theory.
Exactly. So eventually, he actually got into politics. Despite being, a criminal. In all sense and purposes.
So there was a criminal in the
yeah,
parliament.
Exactly. Dun dun dun.
That's
specifically,
the first time in history.
I know. Specifically, the Bavarian Landtag in 1929, in which ingeniously he was a list member for the USPD, which since he left the SPD and joined the independent Social Democratic Party. He did this and he got elected from prison. But eventually he had to wait till he got the seat, but he got it eventually. And during this time, he'd received threats from reactionary murder gangs in Bavaria because at this point, everybody was so pissed off about what happened with the Bavarian Soviet Republic. Region swung to the other side of the pendulum. And that these reactionary murder gangs were, supported by the pro-monarchist government that it was in Bavaria. He also tried to appeal to the Landtag to expel leaders of various right-wing groups, which didn't help, including a certain Austrian man.
An Austrian painter, you mean?
An Austrian painter, yeah. Just cool fact I thought I mentioned.
Just some random guy who probably has no mark on history
exactly,
whatsoever.
Yeah, never heard of him. Probably very insignificant. It was like what was his name? Like Adolf?
Adolphus? Yeah.
Adolphus? Yeah, exactly. But anyway, because despite being part of a splinter party from the SPD, funnily enough, they would reunite with the SPD, force him to become an SPD member again, despite having left the party previously. During this time, he would become a writer for many left and social democrat magazines, in which he attacked the SPD on 2 fronts. Attacking the party for its failure to defend the interests against reactionary businessmen and politicians, and its refusal to liberate Germany by fighting against the Treaty of Versailles.
So this is like an instance where we see both the foreign policy application and the domestic policy application of National Bolshevism.
Exactly.
Because like the inner enemy is the reactionary businessmen,
yes.
and the outer enemy is the signatory parties of the Treaty of Versailles.
Exactly, the Entente.
Yeah.
And he would also later propose the Dawes Plan, which was, a loan basically a way for Germany to be able to pay its loans. But during this time, he would also become increasingly nationalistic, arguing against reparations for draining the lifeblood of the German proletariat. But his nationalistic rhetoric separated him from the communists and identified him as more of the chauvinist wing of the SPD, if not a far-righter. He also urged the SPD to adopt a more nationalistic elements and also policy stance. And he started radicalizing the youth, of the SPD with this, nationalistic, socialist aspect.
Yeah, because youth had to be mobilized to like combat the state which was actively fucking them over.
Exactly. Well, yeah, exactly. And this resulted in what we would call today a posting war, or an angry Twitter thread against the Social Democrat magazine's Die Glocke. By 1926, he was ousted from the Young Socialist movement of the the SPD, and he lost his job in the Textile Workers Union because of his increasing nationalistic elements, and could no longer make money from socialist publications. However, opportunity came knocking on his door with the creation of the old Social Democratic Party. There's a lot of Social Democratic
parties.
I was
going to say, so there was a USDP.
So no, there was a USPD.
But they merged with SPD.
Exactly. Now they're gone.
But now there's the old Social Democratic Party.
Which is the ASP, which was based in Saxony, which was a breakaway from the SPD that was virulently anti-KPD, that's a Communist Party of Germany, and pro-Reich, so that they were in favor of the actual German Reich. These were the kind of like old school guys that would have probably voted for war in the first place, and that Niekisch was able to join them and began work on their journal. And he sought to make this party a third front that would both unite the proletariat and national revolutionary movements that were developing in Germany at this time in the 1920s. In July of this year, he would make a contribution to, what we know as National Bolshevism today, as one of their iconic images, that of the National Bolshevik Eagle, which was an eagle, since this is an audio form, some of you can see this on YouTube, it is of an eagle, a sword in one hand, a sickle in the other, and a hammer in the center of it. Kind of like, the imperial eagles that Germany used to have before, and the sword as nationalistic elements, but also the hammer and the sickle of communist elements. And this would be the logo for his journal, Widerstand, which means resistance, and which was advertised as a magazine for socialist and national revolutionary politics. And those politics were against the West, but the resistance had to wait since Nietzsche called for great preparation, with the intellectual and organizational groundwork having to be laid out. I find it funny when everyone says that we need to work on the intellectual and organizational groundwork, because it makes sense, but how often does that ever happen?
How do you even organize like intellectualism? I feel like free thinking should be an important part of intellectualism.
Well, what you do is you get a bunch. What you do is you get a bunch of Redditors together, real intellectuals, and you get them in one room and you make them scream at each other until everybody leaves, and that's intellectual organization.
No, but I mean, Yeah, fair point. Yeah, fair point.
His critics would actually bash him for this. But people were not happy when they saw this shit because they're like, "What the fuck is this stuff?" They would bash him for this for serving the ends of bourgeois social reaction. Funnily enough, he distinguished himself from the National Socialist, at this time the NSDAP, or the Nationalsozialistische Deutsche Arbeiterpartei.
We apologize to Germans for the pronunciation.
Fick dich!
That wasn't nice. Okay, continue.
And he said that, saying that he and his group were less destructive and hateful, and that their main sin was actually diverting everyone's attention away from the real enemy, the French.
I mean, okay, they're not completely wrong.
Because hating on the French, based.
I mean, yeah, because the French took Alsace-Lorraine, which was like one of the most important provinces of the empire,
and they also temporarily occupied the Ruhr, which people were still pissed off about.
Yeah, the Rhineland.
Yeah. Which is like the main industrial factory for industrial region for Germany. The funny, unfortunately for Niekisch, Widerstand's readership did not reach its target audience of socialist proletariat and the patriotic proletariat, the national revolutionaries.
Yeah, I feel like he was trying to juggle too many ideological groups to be successful.
Yeah. You want to have a clear focus group. Focus test your works. Yeah, we didn't do that.
He tried to be a centrist in the 20th century. It didn't work.
He tried to be the Fox News version of a centrist.
God,
I mean, Tucker. Basically, he's kind of. Basically, he's doing what Tucker Carlson is, but from the left. And mainly it would reach like-minded national Bolsheviks and groups, national Bolshevik groups like the Bund and the Bund Oberland. I don't know how to pronounce it. And it would also create the circle, the resistance circle. And that there's one clear idea that I actually got that was very interesting from this. That the idea of the welfare of the state and the interests of the possessing classes did not coincide, actually. Basically, this is the idea that, you often hear, particularly if you're in America, that elites are anti-America and against the American nation.
Interesting.
Yeah. It's a little tidbit I want to talk about. From the right perspective, the Strasserites and the left Nazis were interested in the ideas of the National Bolsheviks, but criticized them for not being racist enough. This is very funny because Ernst Niekisch himself was anti-Semitic, but he thought that the Nazis were a bit too much.
Yeah, but I feel like especially during that time, anti-Semitism was a prerequisite if you wanted to be a far-right person.
Exactly, but he would also in that they didn't think that he was racist enough, and that race didn't make up an important element of his ideology, and believed that Germanic qualities were more of a state of mind rather than hereditary. So
as in, he didn't want to genocide every single minority or people with disability to create a homogeneous nation,
a pure state where everyone does incest. Because that's basically what it leads to.
So it's more of a thing of assimilation in for state of mind rather than active genocide.
I don't know, because he never achieved power. Spoiler alert. Instead, the enemies were the ones that within the German nation were the ones that rejected the ideology of Widerstand. Instead, those people were anti-Prussian and adopted elements of Western, also Roman civilization. I talked about Arminius before at one point, and this is what it gets to. Arminius, Roman civilization, Roman/Western civilization, which was, democracy, Catholicism, liberalism, and cosmopolitanism. In that they believed in this idea of Prussianized Marxism, the legacy of Prussia, which was actually, this existed within the far right of idea of Prussianism, but was an ideological identification that was very much held with enthusiasm by other National Bolsheviks. A little tidbit is that he was part of the Association for the Study of Russian Planned Economy, or APLAN, alongside various figures such as National Revolutionary Ernst Junger, the neo-pagan Friedrich Heilscher. Sorry about these names. This is going to be a Hungarian one, so I'm going to fuck it up. The future minister of the Hungarian revolutionary government in 1956 and communist philosopher György Lukács, and the German-American communist who would turn anti-communist Karl Wittfogel. And funnily enough, our plan is actually the name of Nazbol website today. Don't go there.
Yeah, don't go there.
There were also other Nazbol groups that were going on at this time. There was the Gegner group that were like, finally they were quote unquote above politics.
See, that's why they didn't get elected.
Exactly. That came in 1932 and believed in an inward revolution for the creation of a new man.
But I mean, like, we're talking about like the main development of the Nazbol ideology.
And we're talking about various different groups that occurred.
No, as in like our main point of focus is the main development, but there were also like other groups independent of like what was happening in the Bavarian Landstad.
Oh yeah, like this is no longer in the Bavarian Landstad. This is like national. Yeah. But most of these groups would end up either getting killed or joining the Nazis.
Yeah.
To end with Ernst Niekisch, his time would end eventually. In 1934. A year after the Nazis gained power in the German election, well, not really, they weren't really elected. They got put in by Hindenburg, yeah. They were banned by the newly elected Nazi government, and in 1937, Niekisch would be arrested by the Gestapo and sentenced for life in prison. He would live on, but he would be blinded and eventually stay in East Germany and then, move to West Germany after he saw the massacre of workers.
Oh, interesting. So he was alive after Nazi Germany took
power.
But
he was blind after he got released. But anyway, I wanted to close this episode by talking about, Joseph Stalin. Because if you want to talk about a left-wing National Bolshevik, most of them point to him. And most modern National Bolsheviks love the guy.
I mean, of course, because he basically put into application what they were all dreaming of.
Yes, exactly. A strong state that had total control over the means of production, one with a revolutionary aesthetic, and also the creation of a national identity.
Yeah,
that was that some even see as a continuation of the Russian national identity.
Yeah, except this one was bigger and badder.
Yeah,
it was a Soviet identity.
Yeah, it was bigger and redder.
Yeah, exactly. So like all the things that made the Russian identity, like landowning and also the Orthodox religion, they were all curtailed for the betterment of the overall Soviet identity.
Exactly. And that the state would be the main supreme thing of it. And through the state, the workers would be liberated.
Yeah.
And this was further further supported by
decolonization.
Well, that, but also the idea of socialism in one country in opposition to
Trotsky's like international socialism.
Yeah, exactly, of eternal revolution. After the miracle at the Vistula, the Soviet Union was kind of limited in where it could go.
Yeah, so like they first needed to make themselves stronger. So that's why, because if they weren't a strong country, then it would have been very hard for them to export the Soviet socialist ideology.
Exactly, but the idea of socialism in one country. Granted, I know there's gonna be some Stalinists yelling at me in the comments. I don't give a shit. I don't entirely know about it, but it's basically that that socialism should happen in one country, and that it should be developed and cultivated in one country. In which most Trotskyists that I've met and talked to, they say was the main reason why the Soviet Union failed, because it was under the siege, and you can only last under a siege for so long, and they weren't able to spread out.
I mean, they did try spreading out, but their main competitor was the United States, which was the richest country at the time.
Exactly.
Still is.
USA, motherfucker!
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you can't slay the USA with like the mere snap of 2 fingers or something.
No, it wasn't Mongolia. They also conquered Mongolia during this time period. But we're reaching the end of this episode 1, and I want to top it off with something that happened. Something that happened after a certain Austrian painter got into power. That one that Niekisch railed against. Funnily enough, his name was Adolf Hitler. What?
What?
No way! What?
Well, seems like we're gonna learn a lot about him in the next episode.
Well, we're actually going to skip him because he
Oh, we
wasn't a
will?
Nazbol.
No, I mean, he was a Nazbol,
But
but
what
like,
he-
didn't he have any effects on the Nazbol?
Well, what he will, and we'll talk about it more. But the funny thing is about Hitler is that he actually was kind of a synthesis of a lot of Nazbol aspects. He made Germany a more not autarkic, but like, self-sufficient nation, as close as autarky you can get while still being capitalist. He included a lot of like revolutionary language and what's it called, aesthetics to it, and he also did the thing as to what National Bolshevism originally was, foreign policy, in that he wouldn't form a non-aggression pact with the Soviet Union. And then he would do the funny.
Yeah, he would start the bloodiest conflict in human history. Yes,
Something very uncharacteristic of Europe.
just industrialized nations massacring each other. Never heard of that one before.
You laughed, right? With that, the world would be plunged into darkness, violence, barbarism, and
a new world order.
Exactly, a new world order would arise from it.
From the ashes, yes.
From the ashes, like a double-headed phoenix.
Yeah, that's what we call the U.S. now, a double-headed phoenix.
Well, I was gonna say that it was one side was Russia. It's like there's two wolves inside of you. One is the Soviet Union. One is the Warsaw Pact, and the other is NATO.
Got it.
But before I say goodbye, we're gonna cut this a little bit. I forgot to mention 2 colorful characters.
Bro, the episode is already 55 fucking minutes long.
We're gonna cut it. Don't worry. I have something to show you. So, during this time, in June of 1929, 2, you could say, hamburgers.
You can't see it, but I'm laughing on the inside.
Two hamburgers, both of them communists from Hamburg.
Yep.
Yeah, no, a very original and funny joke.
That's what we're known for.
Yes. Laufenberg and Wolfheim began to propagate a national communism, in which the restoration of the German fatherland would be achieved by allying with the Soviet Union and then going to war with the Entente. The German proletariat would only have to cooperate with the petty bourgeoisie. I know it's a bit hard with those, with all those, bourgeois motherfuckers. Ew. And then other communists like Karl Radek and, at the time, Vladimir Lenin denounced them for their chauvinism as National Bolsheviks. Yeah, that's the one thing I wanted to add. But thank you so much for tuning in for episode 1 of Ideologica Obscura.
Yeah, thank y'all for putting up with us for this long.
And we'll see you in episode 2. Stay tuned.
Alle Straßen enden, hört unser Weg nicht auf. Wohin wir uns auch wenden, die Zeit im leeren Lauf. Das Herz verbrannt, im Schmerz verbannt. So ziehen wir verloren durch das graue Niemandsland. Vielleicht kehrt von uns keiner mehr zurück ins Heimatland.